On 13th July, Borovčanin arrived at the Kravica warehouse, where over 1,000 Bosnian Muslim men were detained. Outside, in front of the warehouse, he saw a number of dead bodies, what appeared to be a busload. Borovčanin knew that his units were amongst the Bosnian Serb forces with custody and/or control of the Bosnian Muslim prisoners that day, and therefore had a duty to protect the remaining prisoners in the warehouse. The first and only step Borovčanin took after seeing the evidence of prisoner executions was to remove himself and his men from the Kravica warehouse as quickly as he could. Borovčanin had the means to protect the prisoners and knew that it was probable that the prisoners would be killed. Borovčanin's failure to protect the Bosnian Muslim prisoners then still detained substantially contributed to the full-scale execution which later took place at Kravica warehouse. The trial chamber is also satisfied that Borovčanin knew that the prisoners at Kravica warehouse would probably be killed by members of the Bosnian Serb forces there with discriminatory intent. Further, Borovčanin was the superior of the SBP 2nd Sekovinci detachment. Having arrived at the Kravica warehouse shortly after the murder of a busload of prisoners, he had knowledge which was sufficient to put him on notice that his subordinates had committed the crime of murder. For the reasons detailed in the judgment, he failed to take the necessary and reasonable measures required to punish his subordinates for the murders of the busload of Bosnian Muslim prisoners at Kravica warehouse. I now turn to Radivoje Miletić, who in 1995 was the chief of the administration for operations and training at the VRS Main Staff. A significant amount of time during the trial proceedings was devoted by the prosecution and the defense for Miletić to establish the nature and extent of his powers at the time relevant to the indictment. The trial chamber is convinced that from at least May to October 1995, Miletić, in addition to his regular responsibilities, took on certain duties from the Chief of Staff Manojlo Milovanović. However, the trial chamber is not satisfied that Miletić was Deputy Chief of Staff of the VRS Main Staff or was officially, quote, standing in, unquote, for the Chief of Staff. Most importantly, though, the trial chamber has not assessed Miletić's criminal responsibility on the basis of title or even assigned or undertaken responsibilities, but rather on the basis of the factual evidence of his acts and conduct which has been adduced before it. Miletić drafted Directive 7 and whatever his level of input in terms of content or wording, he was intimately acquainted with its final text, including the incriminatory parts. As such, from the early stages, Miletić had full knowledge of the common criminal plan to force the Bosnian Muslim populations from the Srebrenica and Žepa enclaves, and he was instrumental in the plan being captured in writing for dissemination. Through his central role in the drafting process of Directive 7 and of Directive 7/1, Miletić contributed to the joint criminal enterprise to forcibly remove. Miletić further played a role in the process for the approval of humanitarian convoys. Through this, Miletić implemented the instructions of Directive 7 to incrementally and unobtrusively deprive the enclaves of humanitarian aid and UNPROFOR of supplies with the purpose of creating an untenable situation for the population and strangling UNPROFOR. By doing so, Miletić again contributed to the JC to forcibly remove. Considering the scale and scope of the military attack on and the operations to forcibly remove the Bosnian Muslims from the enclaves, coordination from the main staff level was essential. Miletić, with his in-depth knowledge of the strategies and goals of the VRS, was at the center of this coordination. Through the reports he received from subordinate units and his direct contact with the forces in the field, Miletić was fully attuned to all developments in the field and informed on the progress of the operations. Miletić forwarded the knowledge he gained to Mladić and Karadzic, while at the same time he ensured the flow of information from the main staff to subordinate units. Milovanović, the chief of staff and Miletić's direct superior, captured the essence of Miletic's role at the main staff when he called him, quote, the soul of the main staff of the VRS, unquote, and the person, quote, best informed on the situation in the various theaters of the war, unquote. Miletić skillfully and efficiently used his unique position to inform and advise, and thereby enabled the decisions taken to successfully implement the plan, resulting in the forced removal of thousands of Bosnian Muslims from the enclaves. Through these acts, Miletić contributed to the JCE to forcibly remove. Considering all the individual acts and contributions cumulatively, the trial chamber concludes that Miletić made a significant contribution to the JCE to forcibly remove. Miletić furthermore shared the common intent of the JCE. In addition, he carried out his acts in furtherance of the plan to remove the Bosnian Muslims with the specific intent to discriminate on political, racial, or religious grounds. Based on Miletic's level of involvement and his in-depth knowledge and broad overview of the massive operation to forcibly remove the Bosnian Muslims from Srebrenica, it was foreseeable to him that murder would be committed in Potocari and that these murders would be committed with the specific intent to discriminate on political, racial, or religious grounds. Judge Kwon dissents on the foreseeability to Miletić of the killings in Potocari. I turn now to Milan Gvero. In 1995,